Hello, welcome back here to another evening of shared stories and adventures. Tonight we're diving into the world of Stranger Things theories, specifically what might happen in Volume 2 of Season 5. I'll be covering all the biggest theories and predictions I can fit in for tonight, but there's definitely more to speculate about once the next episodes actually drop. So, we'll start with Will's newly revealed powers and what they mean for the final battle. Then, we'll move on to Vecna's absolutely mental plan with those 12 children, Max's role as the potential bridge between worlds, and of course, the heartbreaking character death predictions. We've also got time travel theories, the mind flayer debate, and loads of other wild speculation. Plenty to get talking about, but if you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. But for now, grab your favourite blanket, settle in with some snacks, and let's begin. So Volume 1 just dropped with probably one of the most intense cliffhangers I've seen in ages. Will Byers, after 4 seasons of being connected to the Upside Down, finally tapped into his powers and saved his friends from Demogorgons in the most epic way possible. It was brilliant, honestly. And with Volume 2 dropping on Christmas Day and the finale on New Year's Eve, we've got a lot of time to theorise about where this is all heading. So let's start with probably the biggest revelation from Volume 1, and honestly, it's something fans have been theorising about since literally Season 1. Will Byers has powers now, actual proper telekinetic powers that he used to absolutely obliterate 3 Demogorgons at once, while his friends were seconds away from death. The scene itself was incredible. Mike, Robin and Lucas were all in separate locations around Hawkins, each being hunted by a Demogorgon. The situation looked completely hopeless. And then Will, who'd been having these visions and connections to the hive mind throughout Volume 1, just snapped. He tapped into something deep, and instead of being controlled by Vecna's connection, he turned it against the monsters. With these very specific arm gestures, almost like he was conducting an orchestra of destruction, he froze all 3 Demogorgons simultaneously and then just broke them apart. Limbs snapping, bodies collapsing. It was brutal and brilliant at the same time. What's really interesting is how his powers work differently from Eleven's. When Elle uses her abilities, it's all about concentration and emotional intensity. She closes her eyes, focuses, and the power flows out through sheer force of will. Her nose bleeds, she screams sometimes, and there's this raw energy to it. But Will? His approach is completely different. Noah Schnapp, who plays Will, mentioned in interviews that the physicality was intentionally designed to show that his powers operate through a different mechanism entirely. He's using arm movements, almost like he's manipulating puppets or casting spells. It's very sorcerer-like, which makes perfect sense given his Dungeons & Dragons character. And speaking of D&D, this is where things get properly fascinating. In the party's campaign, Will has always been Will the Wise, the group's wizard or sorcerer depending on which session you're looking at. Wizards in D&D are spellcasters who use arcane magic, and they're known for their precise control and strategic thinking. Back in Season 1, Joyce has that memory of young Will drawing a picture of Will the Wise shooting fireballs at enemies. He specifically chose fireballs, he tells her, because sometimes you need power over cleverness to defeat smart enemies. The fireballs in his drawing were green because he couldn't find a red crayon, and Joyce joked they looked like cabbages. It's this tiny detail from the first season that suddenly feels massively important. But let's talk a bit about why Will specifically has these abilities. According to the opening flashback that Volume 1 gave us, which shows what actually happened to Will in the Upside Down back in November 1983, Vecna directly encountered him. The Demogorgon brought Will to the Hawkins Library, which was serving as Vecna's lair at the time, and Vecna said, "We can begin," before using those vine-like tendrils to pump particles into Will's body. Those particles created the connection we've been seeing throughout the entire series. Will's link to the hive mind, his ability to sense when the Mind Flayer was close, the visions, the possession in Season 2, all of it stems from that moment. So basically, Vecna experimented on Will first. He was the prototype, the proof of concept that showed what was possible when you create a connection between a human host and the upside down. And now, years later, Will's learned how to reverse that connection and use it as a weapon. The Duffer Brothers have said in interviews that they've been planning this reveal for ages. Ross Duffer specifically mentioned that they've been talking about Will having powers for as long as he can really remember. It wasn't a last-minute decision or something they threw in for shock value. This has been the plan from very early on, which explains why they kept Will so connected to the Upside Down, even after he was rescued. He was never fully free of it, and now we know why. There's also this really cool parallel to Harry Potter and Voldemort that both Noah Schnapp and the Duffers have mentioned. In Harry Potter, Harry can see into Voldemort's mind and feel what he's feeling because a piece of Voldemort's soul is inside him. It's an involuntary connection that goes both ways. Harry uses it to track what Voldemort's doing, but Voldemort can also use it to manipulate Harry or plant false visions. The Will and Vecna relationship works very similarly. Will can tap into the hive mind and see what the Demogorgons see, feel where Vecna is, and apparently now control the creatures directly. But that means Vecna can potentially use that same connection against him. In episode 4, right before Will uses his powers, Vecna reveals his whole plan about needing 12 children as perfect vessels. He specifically tells Will that his weakness proved what could be achieved. It's this really chilling moment because Vecna's basically admitting that Will was the test subject who showed him the blueprint for his master plan. And then he tells Will he's going to use him as his spy one last time. That's terrifying when you think about it, because if Vecna can control Will the way he controlled him back in Season 2, then having these powers might actually be a trap. One theory that's gained loads of traction is that Will might eventually be able to control the entire hive mind, not just individual Demogorgons. If the hive mind works the way it seems to, with everything connected to Vecna at the centre, and Will has this direct line into that network, then theoretically he could seize control of the whole thing. It would be like hacking into the system and changing the admin password. Vecna thinks he's in charge, but Will could potentially override his commands and turn every creature in the Upside Down against him. That would be absolutely brilliant if they pull it off. To be honest, this moment gave me chills when I first watched it. Seeing Will finally have agency after spending 4 seasons as the victim was so satisfying. He's been the kid who got kidnapped, the kid who got possessed, the kid who has visions and can't live a normal life. And now he's potentially the most powerful weapon they have against Vecna. It's character development done right, where everything that seemed like trauma and weakness gets transformed into strength. There's also this question of whether Will's powers will work the same way Eleven's do in terms of physical toll. When Elle uses her abilities extensively, she gets exhausted, her nose bleeds heavily, and sometimes she passes out or temporarily loses her powers. We saw Will get a nosebleed after killing those 3 Demogorgons, which definitely suggests there's a cost to using these abilities. But we don't know yet if he'll face the same limitations Elle does, or if his connection-based powers work differently enough that the rules are changed. Fun fact, Noah Schnapp mentioned that he actually went back and rewatched the Harry Potter films to study how Daniel Radcliffe played the Voldemort connection scenes. He wanted to understand how to portray that invasive, uncomfortable feeling of having someone else's consciousness inside your head. He also said the physicality of Will's powers required a lot of rehearsal to get right, because the Duffers wanted it to look distinctly different from anything Eleven does. It needed to feel like Will was manipulating the creatures through his connection rather than just using raw telekinetic force. The big question heading into Volume 2 is whether Will can master these powers in time, or whether Vecna will exploit the connection to turn Will into a weapon against his friends. It's a proper double-edged sword situation, and honestly, I'm terrified about where they're taking this. Speaking of Vecna, let's talk about his absolutely mental plan for those 12 children, because this is where things get properly dark. In episode 4, when Vecna walks through the military gate into the Upside Down in that absolutely terrifying Darth Vader-style entrance, he lays out his whole scheme to Will. He needs 12 children, specifically aged between 9 and 11, to serve as what he calls perfect vessels. And the way he describes it is just chilling. According to Vecna, children in that age range are easily shaped and controlled. Their minds are still developing, they're impressionable, and they haven't fully formed their sense of identity yet, which makes them ideal for whatever horrific transformation he's planning. He tells Will directly that Will was the one who showed him what was possible when he took him as his first vessel back in 1983. Will was 11 years old when he disappeared, right in that target age range, and Vecna's basically admitting that the whole experiment with Will proved the concept works. What's fascinating and deeply unsettling about this plan is that Vecna's shifted his entire strategy. In Season 4, he was targeting teenagers, specifically ones dealing with trauma and guilt. Chrissy Cunningham, Fred Benson, Patrick McKinney, and Max Mayfield were all older teens with serious psychological wounds that Vecna could exploit. He fed on their pain, used their guilt as an entry point, and killed them to open gates between worlds. But now he's moved on from that approach entirely. He's going younger, and the implications of that are god-awful. Holly Wheeler, Nancy and Mike's little sister, becomes the first confirmed victim of this new plan when she gets kidnapped by a Demogorgon in episode 2. What makes Holly's situation particularly interesting is how Vecna lures her in. He doesn't appear to her as the monstrous creature we know. Instead, he takes on this human-like persona that Holly calls Mr. What's-It. The name itself is a reference to her favourite book, A Wrinkle in Time, which is this classic science fiction novel about kids fighting against an evil force that wants to control minds and eliminate free will. The parallels are not subtle. In A Wrinkle in Time, Mrs. What's-It is one of the good characters who helps the children on their journey. But Vecna's twisted version, Mr. What's-It, is using that familiar friendly persona to manipulate Holly. She trusts him because he doesn't look like a monster. He looks human, almost kind, and that makes him so much more dangerous. Matt Duffer mentioned in interviews that Holly having a bigger role in the final season will answer loads of questions about the Upside Down and why Will was originally kidnapped. Everything's apparently coming full circle through her storyline. One theory that's gained massive traction is that the 12 children Vecna wants are meant to parallel the Hawkins lab experiments. Dr. Brenner had test subjects numbered from 001 to at least 018 that we know of, with 11 being 011 and Carly being 008. Vecna himself was 001, the original experiment. So there's this possibility that Vecna's trying to create his own version of those experiments, but instead of Brenner's methods, he's using the Upside Down's power to transform these kids into something else entirely. His own army of telekinetically enhanced soldiers, loyal only to him. Another theory suggests the children will be used to literally reshape reality. Vecna's ultimate goal has never been subtle. He wants to remake the world according to his vision, eliminating what he sees as humanity's lies and pretenses. In Season 4, he tells Nancy that he's been trying to create a new world, and each gate he opens brings him closer to merging the Upside Down with the right side up permanently. If he has 12 children acting as anchors or conduits, he might be able to accelerate that process exponentially. 12 points of connection, 12 vessels channeling the Upside Down's energy, could theoretically tear down the barriers between dimensions entirely. There's also this darker theory that Vecna wants to possess all 12 children simultaneously, essentially spreading his consciousness across multiple hosts. He'd be everywhere at once, impossible to kill because destroying one body wouldn't stop the others. It's like a Horcrux situation, but instead of objects, He's using living children as anchors for his consciousness. Absolutely horrifying when you think about it. The age range is significant for another reason too. Kids between 9 and 11 are old enough to have developed powers potentially, if they have any latent abilities, but young enough that Vecna can still mould them before they develop the kind of resistance or willpower that older kids might have. Will was 11 and clearly had some kind of sensitivity to the upside down even before his kidnapping. He sensed the Demogorgon before anyone else did. So maybe Vecna's specifically targeting children who have that potential, that spark of something that makes them receptive to his influence. Jamie Campbell Bower, who plays Vecna, gave an interview where he said viewers should feel like they're holding onto their chairs going, "No, no, no," when they see what he's up to in Volume 2. He described Volume 1 as an explosive setup to what continues in Volume 2 and the finale, which suggests that whatever Vecna does with these children, it's going to be absolutely devastating to watch. What makes this plan so disturbing is that it preys on innocence. Teenagers, like the ones he targeted in Season 4 at least, had some understanding of danger, some ability to fight back mentally, even if they ultimately failed. But these younger children, they're just kids. Holly Wheeler is maybe 8 or 9 years old. She plays with toys, reads picture books, trusts adults because that's what children do. Using that innocence and trust against them is particularly cruel, even for Vecna. There's speculation that each child might represent a specific aspect of Vecna's plan. 12 is a significant number in lots of mythologies and belief systems. 12 apostles, 12 zodiac signs, 12 months. It's a number of completion, of cycles. If Vecna needs exactly 12, not 11 or 13, then each child probably serves a specific purpose in his ritual or transformation. Maybe they're meant to represent 12 gates, or 12 aspects of reality he wants to control, or 12 points on some kind of mystical diagram that will reshape existence itself. Ross Duffer teased that Volume 2 will reveal how Dimension X, which was first introduced in the first Shadow Stage play, directly ties into the Upside Down, Vecna, and the Mind Flayer. If Dimension X is involved, and Vecna needs these 12 children, then maybe he's trying to create a permanent bridge between dimensions. Not just gates that can be opened and closed, but a fundamental merging where Dimension X, the Upside Down, and the real world all become one twisted reality with Vecna as the architect. The really tragic element here is that Will inadvertently showed Vecna the blueprint for all of this. If Will hadn't survived his time in the Upside Down, if he hadn't developed that connection and maintained his sense of self, while possessed by the Mind Flayer in Season 2, Vecna might never have known it was possible. Will's strength and resilience, the very things that saved him, are now being used as the model for Vecna's most ambitious and horrible plan yet. Whatever happens to these 12 children in Volume 2, it's not going to be good. And poor Holly Wheeler is right in the middle of it, probably the youngest and most vulnerable of all Vecna's targets. But Holly's not alone in Vecna's mindscape. Let's talk about Max, because her situation is one of the most fascinating puzzle pieces in this whole mess. Max Mayfield technically died at the end of Season 4. Her heart stopped beating for a full minute after Vecna broke her limbs and took her eyes. 11 managed to restart her heart using her powers, pulling Max back from death, but Max never woke up. She's been in a coma ever since, her body alive but her consciousness somewhere else entirely, and Volume 1 finally showed us where that somewhere else is. She's trapped inside Vecna's mind, not the Upside Down itself, but actually inside Vecna's consciousness, wandering through his memories like a ghost. When we see her in Volume 1, she's roaming through different moments from Vecna's past, including this really eerie scene where she appears at Hawkins High School and watches a younger version of Joyce Byers putting on a school play. The play is Dark of the Moon, which is a direct reference to the first Shadow Stage play. It's all connected to Vecna's origins, his time as Henry Creel, and Max is basically getting a front row seat to his entire backstory. Here's where it gets interesting. Max isn't just stuck there helplessly. She's moving freely through these memories, observing, learning, And when she encounters Holly Wheeler, who Vecna has also pulled into his mindscape, Max immediately understands the situation and starts helping her. She tells Holly they need more time to figure out an escape plan, so she sends Holly back to Mr. Whatsit to pretend like nothing's happened. Max is strategizing, buying time, which suggests she's retained all her intelligence and survival instincts, even in this trapped state. The prevailing theory is that Max might actually be Vecna's biggest weakness. She's the one who got away, sort of. She died, but 11 brought her back, and now her consciousness is stuck in a place Vecna probably didn't expect anyone to survive. She's seen things he might not want anyone to see. She has access to his memories, his thoughts, potentially his plans. That's an insane advantage if she can figure out how to use it. There's also this theory that Max will serve as a bridge between 11 and Vecna. 11 has been trying to reach Max throughout Volume 1, attempting to pull her out of the coma, but she hasn't been able to break through. Max is caught between life and death, between the real world and Vecna's consciousness, between her friends and the monster who tried to kill her. If anyone can create a connection that lets 11 strike directly at Vecna's mind, it's probably Max. I think the Duffers are playing the long game here. They could have killed Max in Season 4. It would have been heartbreaking, but clean. Instead, they kept her alive in this liminal state, and there's got to be a reason for that. Max isn't just lingering in a coma for emotional impact. She's positioned exactly where she needs to be for the endgame. Some fans have theorized that Max might possess knowledge that's crucial to defeating Vecna. She's literally inside his head, accessing memories and information that no one else can see. Maybe she'll discover the origin of his powers, or the moment he first connected with the Mind Flayer, or some weakness he's kept hidden. In Season 4, Nancy got a glimpse of Vecna's plans when he showed her visions, but Max is getting the full, unfiltered experience of his entire existence. There's something tragically beautiful about Max's situation too. She spent so much of the series dealing with trauma, guilt over Billy's death, depression, isolation. She was running up that hill, trying to escape her pain, and Kate Bush's song became this anthem of survival for her. But even after surviving Vecna's curse, she's still trapped, still fighting. The girl who refused to give up is now stuck in the mind of the monster who tried to break her, and she's still refusing to give up. Sadie Sink, who plays Max, has been incredibly tight-lipped about what happens in Volume 2, but she has said that Max's storyline goes to places she never expected. That could mean anything, honestly. Maybe Max figures out how to fight Vecna from the inside. Maybe she makes a sacrifice that saves everyone. Maybe she finds a way to turn his own powers against him. The possibilities are endless when you're literally trapped inside the villain's consciousness. Another angle worth considering is that Max's presence in Vecna's mind might be affecting him in ways he doesn't realize. Consciousness isn't one-way traffic. If Max can see his memories, maybe her presence is creating interference in his thoughts, distracting him, weakening his focus. It's like having someone constantly looking over your shoulder, except the someone is inside your own head. The partnership between Max and Holly in Vecna's mindscape is crucial too. Holly's young, scared, and new to all of this. Max is experienced. She's fought these monsters before, and she knows how they work. She can protect Holly, guide her, maybe even help her resist Vecna's influence. And Holly, being younger and less traumatized, might see things in Vecna's memories that Max doesn't notice. Different perspectives on the same information. There's also the question of whether Max can communicate with the outside world while she's trapped. Can she send messages through dreams? Can 11 reach her if she tries hard enough? If they can establish some kind of connection, Max could relay intelligence about Vecna's plans, his weaknesses, his next moves. She'd be the ultimate spy, embedded so deep that Vecna doesn't even know she's gathering intel. To be honest, I'm really hoping Max gets to be the hero of her own story here. She's been through hell and back, literally died and came back, and she deserves to be the one who lands a critical blow against the monster who tried to destroy her. The idea of Max finding Vecna's weakness from the inside and then helping 11 exploit it, that would be so satisfying. Whatever role Max plays in Volume 2, it's definitely going to be significant. The Duffers don't keep characters in comas for dramatic effect alone. Max is exactly where the story needs her to be, and that's inside Vecna's head with access to everything he's hiding. Now, speaking of hidden secrets, let's talk about Carly's return, which I've got to say, absolutely no one saw coming. Carly, also known as 8 or 008 from the Hawkins Lab experiments, last appeared in Season 2, Episode 7. You know, that episode in Chicago that loads of people either skipped entirely or just tolerate because it takes 11 away from Hawkins for a whole episode. Most fans consider it the weakest episode of the series, and honestly, I get why. It felt disconnected from everything else happening, and Carly herself, while interesting, never seemed essential to the main story. Until now. At the end of Volume 1, when Hopper and 11 infiltrate the military base that's been set up inside the Upside Down, they discover something shocking. Dr. K, the mysterious new villain, played by Linda Hamilton, has been holding someone prisoner, and it's Carly. She's hooked up to loads of machines, with blood bags and wires connecting her to various devices, completely unconscious. The implication is that Dr. K's been using her somehow, maybe studying her powers, or possibly even siphoning them. For those who need a refresher on what Carly's powers actually do, she's got this ability to create incredibly realistic hallucinations. She can make people see, hear, and experience things that aren't really happening. In Season 2, she demonstrates this multiple times. She conjures massive swarms of spiders to terrify someone. She creates the illusion of a solid steel wall rising from the ground to block the police. Her powers are all about perception and manipulation of reality through someone else's senses. What's cool about this is how different her abilities are from 11's. 11 has raw telekinetic power. She can move objects, crush things, stop hearts, all through physical force projected from her mind. But Carly works on a completely different level. She gets inside your head and changes what you perceive. You could be standing in an empty room, but if Carly wants you to see a burning building, that's what you'll see. You could be alone, but she can make you believe you're surrounded by enemies. It's psychological warfare rather than physical combat. Ross Duffer addressed Kaylee's return in an interview, saying they didn't feel like they could end the story of Stranger Things without bringing her back into the fold. He mentioned that as they were breaking the season, they realised bringing her back really helped with 11's storyline and how they wanted to wrap her story up. So there's a real reason for it beyond just tying up loose ends. Carly apparently plays a really important role moving forward in Volume 2, and Linnea Berthelsen, the actress who plays her, gets a chance to actually show what she's capable of doing. The theories about Carly's role are brilliant. One major idea is that her hallucination powers will be crucial in fighting Vecna. Think about it. Vecna operates by getting inside people's minds, showing them visions, trapping them in their own guilt and trauma. He's a psychological predator. But what if Carly can turn that against him? What if she can make Vecna himself hallucinate his own defeat, or trap him in a false reality while the others attack? Another theory suggests that Carly and 11 working together create an unstoppable combination. 11 provides the physical power, the ability to actually destroy things and hurt Vecna in a tangible way. Carly provides the psychological warfare, confusing him, disorienting him, maybe even making him believe he's already won, so he lets his guard down. It's the perfect pairing of complementary abilities. There's also speculation that Carly might be able to infiltrate Vecna's mindscape the way Max has, but voluntarily and with full control. If she can create hallucinations powerful enough to fool someone like Vecna, she might be able to navigate the mental landscape he's created and help Max and Holly escape. Or she could plant false memories, corrupt his connection to the hive mind, basically sabotage him from the inside, using her unique skill set. What makes Carly's return particularly interesting is the question of why Dr. K was holding her specifically. The military clearly knows about the Hawkins lab kids. They've been hunting 11 for ages, but Dr. K went out of her way to capture Carly and keep her alive, hooked up to these weird machines. That suggests Carly's powers have some unique application that Dr. K wanted to study or exploit. Maybe the military was trying to figure out how to use hallucination abilities for warfare or interrogation. Maybe Dr. K wanted to replicate those powers in other subjects. I'm not going to lie, most people skipped that Season 2 episode, myself included, on first watch. It felt like a detour from the main plot, and Carly's punk rock gang in Chicago didn't really connect with the small-town horror vibe that makes Stranger Things work. But bringing her back now recontextualizes that entire episode. It wasn't a random side quest, it was introducing a character who'd become crucial to the endgame. There's also this interesting parallel between Carly and Eleven's relationship and the concept of found family. Carly tried to convince Eleven in Season 2 that they should use their powers for revenge, to punish the people who hurt them. But Eleven chose a different path. She went back to Hawkins, back to her friends, back to the people who loved her unconditionally. Now, years later, they're being brought back together under completely different circumstances. Carly's been captured and exploited again. Eleven's trying to save the world. Their reunion could be really powerful if it's handled right. Fun fact, Linnea Berthelsen was only in 2 episodes of Season 2, and one of them was mostly just establishing her character through Terry Ives' memories. She didn't get loads of screen time, and fans never really warmed to her because the episode disrupted the flow of Season 2's momentum. So the Duffers bringing her back and giving her a meaningful role feels like they're saying, "No, this character matters. We didn't waste your time. Here's why." The big question is how quickly Carly recovers once Eleven frees her. She's clearly been imprisoned and possibly experimented on for a while now. Her powers might be weakened, or she might need time to rebuild her strength. But if she's at full capacity, and if she and Eleven can coordinate their abilities effectively, they could be the key to finally taking Vecna down for good. So having Carly back in the mix, that's a proper game changer. 2 sisters, 2 completely different power sets, and one very angry monster who's about to find out what happens when you mess with the wrong family. Since we're on the topic of game changers, let's dive into the time travel theories, because this is where things get properly complicated and my brain starts to hurt a little. One of the biggest revelations in Season 4 came from Nancy's diary. When she was in the Upside Down, she noticed something deeply weird. The Upside Down version of Hawkins isn't current. It's frozen in time, specifically on November 6th, 1983. That's the exact day Will Byers disappeared. The exact day 11 made contact with the Demogorgon in the sensory deprivation tank at Hawkins' lab. The exact day everything went wrong. This has spawned loads of theories about time travel being the key to defeating Vecna once and for all. If the Upside Down is literally stuck on that specific date, then that date must be significant in a way we don't fully understand yet. And if you can access a place that's frozen in time, then theoretically, you might be able to use it to travel back to that moment and change things. The most popular theory is that someone, probably 11, will figure out how to send either herself or someone else back to November 6th, 1983 to prevent the original gate from ever opening. It's very Avengers Endgame. That film proved that time travel can work as a solution for defeating villains, and loads of fans think Stranger Things might follow a similar path. You go back, you fix the mistake that started everything, and boom, problem solved. Except it's never that simple, is it? Time travel in fiction always comes with paradoxes. If they prevent the gate from opening, does that mean Will never gets kidnapped? Does that mean 11 never meets Mike and the others? Does that mean 4 seasons worth of events just get erased? It's the classic grandfather paradox situation. If you go back and prevent the circumstances that led to you needing to go back in time, then you never go back in time, which means the circumstances happen, which means you do go back in time. It's circular and confusing, and honestly makes my head spin. But there's another angle to this. Some fans theorize that Will himself actually created the frozen upside down, or at least influenced it somehow. When he was trapped there for a week, terrified and alone, he desperately wanted to go home. He wanted things to be the way they were. And what if that desire, combined with the upside down's strange properties and his latent connection to that world, somehow locked the upside down in place? It became a snapshot of Hawkins from the moment he entered it, frozen because Will's consciousness, or powers, or whatever you want to call it, imposed that stability. It's a bit like how the upside down seems to respond to emotions and thoughts. The mind flayer took the shape it did because of Will's fear. The vines spread in patterns that mimicked living things. So maybe the frozen date isn't random. Maybe it's a direct result of Will being the first human to survive extended time there. Another theory suggests 11 created the snapshot when she first touched the Demogorgon in the void. That contact was the moment the gate opened. That was when everything changed. If 11's powers were responsible for creating the rift between dimensions, then maybe her psychic energy imprinted November 6th, 1983 onto the upside down itself. It's like taking a photograph at the moment of impact. What's wild about the time travel theory is that the upside down's timeless nature actually makes it plausible within the show's logic. It's not just frozen, it's outside normal time in some fundamental way. Dimension X, which was introduced in the first Shadow stage play, is described as existing beyond normal temporal rules. If the upside down is connected to or derived from Dimension X, then time might work completely differently there. You could theoretically use it as a bridge to travel to specific moments. Imagine if they pull off a full-time heist-style sequence in Volume 2. The gang realizes they need to go back to key moments from previous seasons to gather something, or change something, or warn their past selves about what's coming. We could revisit the first gate opening. We could see the moment Vecna first entered the Upside Down. We could watch the creation of the Mind Flayer from a different perspective. It would be this amazing opportunity to recontextualize everything we've seen while moving the plot forward. There's also the theory that the timeless nature of the Upside Down is exactly why Vecna chose it as his base. If he exists partially outside of time, he can plan and act without the normal constraints of linear progression. He can be patient because time doesn't affect him the same way. And if he's trying to merge the Upside Down with the real world, he'd be imposing that timelessness onto reality itself. Everything would stop progressing, frozen like the Upside Down is frozen, with Vecna as the only force capable of change. But here's where the paradoxes get really messy. If someone does go back to November 6th, 1983 and prevents the gate from opening, what happens to everyone's memories? Does Mike remember meeting 11? Does Joyce remember searching for Will? Do any of them remember the past 4 years of fighting supernatural threats? Or does the timeline just reset completely and they all wake up on November 7th, 1983 with no knowledge of what could have been? Some fans think the show might do a branching timeline situation instead, where changing the past creates an alternate reality rather than erasing the original. So the characters we've been following still exist and still remember everything, but somewhere else there's another version of events where the gate never opened and life went on normally. It's less tragic that way, because you're not erasing the relationships and growth that happened, you're just creating a second chance for a different version of these people. To be honest, I'm not sure if I want time travel to be the solution. On one hand, it's clever, and it explains why the Upside Down is frozen on that specific date. On the other hand, it risks feeling like a cheat. Like we spent all this time watching these characters fight and grow and suffer, and then it all just gets undone. That's narratively risky, But the Duffers have been planning this ending for basically a decade. They've known how it ends since before they finished season 1. So if they're going to use time travel, they've probably figured out how to do it in a way that feels earned rather than convenient. Maybe the time travel fails and they have to find another solution. Maybe it works but comes with a cost so high that it's not really a victory. Maybe it's only used for reconnaissance, to gather information rather than change events. There's this interview where the Duffers mentioned that everything in season 5 comes full circle. We're going back to where it all began. That could be metaphorical, meaning the themes and character arcs complete their journeys. But it could also be literal. We're literally going back to November 6, 1983, to the moment where everything went wrong, and this time we're going to make it right. The other interesting bit is how this connects to Eleven's powers. She's demonstrated the ability to access the past through psychic connections. She's seen her mother's memories. She's visited places from her history. If she can access the past mentally, is it really that much of a stretch to think she could access it physically? Especially if the Upside Down is literally frozen in the past and she has a direct connection to it. Time travel is always messy. It raises more questions than it answers, and it's incredibly easy to mess up from a storytelling perspective. But if anyone can pull it off, it's the Duffers. They've been meticulously planning every detail of this show, planting seeds and callbacks that pay off seasons later. If time travel is part of the endgame, they've been setting it up since the beginning. We'll just have to wait until December to see if any of this actually happens. But the frozen date, the timeless Upside Down, the constant references to going back to where it all began, it all points toward time being a major factor in how this story ends. Now let's talk about something that doesn't require time travel to be terrifying. The character death predictions. Because let's be real, someone's probably not making it out alive. The Duffers have never been shy about killing off beloved characters. Bob Newby, who was basically just a sweet guy trying to help Joyce and her boys, got brutally torn apart by demodogs in season 2. Barb, Nancy's best friend, died in season 1 and her death haunted Nancy for years. Billy Hargrove, despite being a complicated antagonist for most of his time on the show, got a redemption arc right before the Mind Flayer killed him in season 3. And Eddie Munson, who became a fan favourite instantly, sacrificed himself in season 4 to give the others more time. The show has established pretty clearly that no one is truly safe. So the question isn't if someone will die in season 5. The question is who. Let's start with who's probably safe. Mike Wheeler, Lucas Sinclair, and Dustin Henderson are almost certainly making it out alive. These three have been the core of the party since day 1, and killing any of them would break the show's heart. There's also this awareness among fans, and probably among the Duffers themselves, about horror movie tropes. Black characters dying first is a tired racist trope, and the Duffers are definitely conscious of that. Lucas isn't going to die just for shock value. Same with his sister Erica, who's become such a great character in her own right. Robin Buckley is also probably safe for similar reasons. She's queer, she's beloved, and killing her would feel like falling into the bury your gaze trope that's plagued so many shows. The Duffers have been really good about representation with Robin's character, and I don't think they'd undercut that by killing her off in the finale. She deserves to graduate, go to college, and live her life. Max is in a complicated category. She technically already died once. The Duffers could have kept her dead in season 4, but they chose to bring her back and put her in this liminal coma state. That suggests they have plans for her beyond just being a tragic loss. I think Max survives, possibly even wakes up and gets some kind of resolution to her story. She's been through too much to not get a chance at recovery. Now let's talk about who's in serious danger. Steve Harrington is the most predicted death in basically every fan poll and betting site. The odds on him dying are apparently around 5-2, which is pretty high. Steve's had this incredible character arc from douchey popular kid to protective big brother figure. And there's this tragic poetry to the idea of him sacrificing himself to save the others. especially if it's to protect Nancy or Dustin, the two people he's closest to. There's also the whole love triangle situation with Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve. If Steve dies heroically, it would resolve that triangle in a way that's bittersweet but definitive. I'm not going to lie, I really don't want Steve to die. Joe Keery has made him one of the best characters on the show, and Steve deserves to open that Scoops Ahoy franchise he joked about. But narratively, his death would hit harder than almost anyone else's. He's beloved, he's heroic, and his loss would devastate multiple characters. That's exactly the kind of impact the Duffers might be looking for in a final season. Murray Bowman is another character in danger. He's been this quirky conspiracy theorist who somehow ended up being right about everything, and he's developed close relationships with Joyce and Hopper. There's a theory going around that Murray might sacrifice himself for Nancy and Jonathan, possibly as a way of atoning for being so pushy about their teenage relationship back in season 2. It would be very on brand for Murray to go out doing something both heroic and slightly chaotic. Then there's the big one. 11. 11 dying would be the finale of all finales. She's the main character, the one with the most powerful abilities, the emotional centre of the entire show. Betting sites have her at 2-1 odds for dying, which is second only to Hopper. The theory here is pretty straightforward. 11 opened the first gate to the Upside Down when she made contact with the Demogorgon. It's poetic and tragic if she has to be the one who closes it permanently, and if doing so costs her life. There's this idea floating around that 11 might choose to stay in the Upside Down permanently, either to keep the gates sealed or because closing them from the inside is the only way to make it stick. She'd be alive, but separated from everyone she loves, trapped in that horrible place forever. It's almost worse than death in some ways. The girl who spent her whole childhood imprisoned in Hawkins' lab would end up imprisoned again, but this time by choice, to save the world. Millie Bobby Brown has been incredibly cryptic about the ending in interviews. She's cried talking about it. She said it's beautiful and devastating, and she's mentioned that 11's journey comes to a close in a way that feels right. None of that sounds like a happy ending where Elle gets to live a normal life with Mike and her friends. To be honest, if 11 sacrifices herself, I'm going to be absolutely destroyed. But it would also make sense. Her entire story has been about making choices, about claiming agency over her own life after having it controlled by others for so long, choosing to sacrifice herself on her own terms to save the people she loves. That's powerful. It's heartbreaking, but it's powerful. Hopper is another character who might not make it. He already had a fake-out death in Season 3, and the Duffers brought him back for Season 4 and 5. Some fans think that was his reprieve, his second chance, and now his number's actually up. Hopper's at 1-1 odds for dying, which means betting sites think it's basically a coin flip. The man's been through Russian prison, fought demogorgons with a sword, and dealt with more trauma than most people could survive. If he gets to retire with Joyce and just be a dad to Elle and the boys, that would be lovely, but there's also the possibility that he makes one final sacrifice to protect his family. Joyce Byers is probably safe. She's been through absolute hell, losing Bob, almost losing Will multiple times, and spending years in a constant state of terror over her children. The Duffers would have to be truly cruel to kill her off after all that. She deserves to live, to rebuild, to finally have some peace. Nancy and Jonathan are interesting because they're in this weird middle ground. They're not original party members, but they've been central to the story since the beginning. Jonathan's less likely to die than Nancy, mostly because Nancy's been positioning herself as this fearless investigative journalist who runs toward danger. She's the one who shot Vecna in Season 4. She's the one who's always first through the door. That bravery could easily become fatal heroism. Will Byers is the hardest to predict. He's where it all started. The entire show began with his disappearance. There's a beautiful, tragic symmetry to the idea of Will staying behind in the upside down permanently, finally mastering the connection that's haunted him since childhood and using it to keep everyone else safe. But there's also the argument that Will deserves to live more than anyone. He's been the victim so many times. Let the kid survive and be happy for once. The really painful theory is that both Will and 11 stay in the upside down together. Two people with powers and connections to that world choosing to remain there so their friends and family can live normal lives. They'd have each other at least. Noah Schnapp and Millie Bobby Brown are best friends in real life, and the idea of their characters being trapped together in the dark dimension is both beautiful and utterly heartbreaking. There's also the question of whether the Duffers will actually have the guts to kill major characters, or if they'll find a way to give everyone a relatively happy ending. They've said the finale's emotional and satisfying, but satisfying doesn't necessarily mean happy. It just means it feels right for the story they've been telling. Personally, I think we're going to lose at least two major characters. Steve and Murray feel like the most likely candidates from a narrative perspective. 11's death or permanent separation would provide the most emotional impact. And Hopper's already died once, so him dying for real this time would complete that arc in a devastating way. Whatever happens, I'm going to need therapy after this finale, and probably a lot of tissues. The Duffers have spent nearly a decade building these characters and making us love them. Saying goodbye is going to hurt no matter how many or how few of them survive. But speaking of emotional devastation, let's talk about Dr. K and the military, because Linda Hamilton did not come to Stranger Things just to play a generic villain. Linda Hamilton is a science fiction legend. She's Sarah Connor from Terminator, one of the most iconic action heroes in cinema history. When you cast someone like that, someone with her specific gravitas and association with fighting unstoppable threats, you're making a statement. Dr. K isn't just another government scientist, she's something much more dangerous. From the moment we meet her in Volume 1, Dr. K is obsessed with one thing. I need the girl, she tells Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan and the military personnel. Not, we should capture her, or it would be helpful to have her. She needs 11. It's personal, it's urgent, and it's clearly been driving her for a while. The military's presence in Hawkins has been oppressive throughout Volume 1. They've taken control of the town under the guise of earthquake relief. They've set up checkpoints and patrols, and they're actively hunting 11. But Dr. K isn't working from the main military base in town. She's set up her own lab inside the Upside Down itself, which is absolutely mental when you think about it. This woman has established a functioning research facility in a hostile alien dimension filled with monsters and toxic spores. She's got equipment, specimens, and apparently the resources to capture and imprison someone like Carly. That level of commitment and infrastructure suggests she's been planning this for ages. You don't just build a lab in the Upside Down on a whim. This required preparation, funding, and knowledge that goes way beyond what the military should theoretically have. One of the most disturbing things about Dr. K's lab is what's in it. She's got vine-like tendrils, the same kind that Vecna uses to infect people and pump particles into their bodies. She's got specimens from upside-down creatures, and she's got these devices that completely overwhelm 11 when she gets too close to them. 11, who can flip vans and crush people's bones with her mind, is basically helpless when exposed to whatever technology Dr. K has developed. The big theory here is that Dr. K is trying to weaponize the Upside Down, not just study it or contain it, but actively use it for military purposes. Imagine if the government could control demogorgons the way Vecna does. Imagine if they could open gates at will, sending monsters into enemy territory or using the Upside Down as a transport system. It's horrifying, but it's exactly the kind of thing a secret military research program would try to develop. There's also speculation that Dr. K wants to recreate Dr. Brenner's experiments, but with more control and better understanding. Brenner was experimenting on children, trying to create psychic soldiers through a combination of drugs, sensory deprivation, and possibly exposure to upside-down energy. His methods were brutal and produced mixed results. Most of the test subjects died or went mad. Only a handful, like 11 and Carly, survived with functional powers. But what if Dr. K has figured out a more reliable method? What if she's learned from Brenner's failures and developed a process that can give people powers without killing them? That would explain why she needs 11 specifically. 11 is the most successful result of Brenner's experiments. Studying her, understanding exactly how her powers work at a biological and psychic level, could be the key to replicating the process. The connection to the original Hawkins lab is definitely there. The military was funding Brenner's work before everything went wrong. They knew about the experiments, they knew about the children, and they've been covering it up for years. Dr. K might be Brenner's successor, continuing his work under military auspices, but with the benefit of years of additional research and the physical presence of the Upside Down to study. What's sinister about this is the devices that shut down Eleven's powers. In the scene where Hopper and Eleven infiltrate the base, Eleven tries to use her abilities, but these machines start emitting something that causes her intense pain and disables her completely. She's left vulnerable, gasping, unable to defend herself. That technology didn't appear overnight. Someone's been studying how psychic powers work and how to counteract them. I mean, think about it. The government has been aware of the Upside Down since November 1983, when the first gate opened. That's over 4 years to study it, experiment with it, and develop countermeasures against threats from that dimension. They've had access to Demogorgon corpses, they've probably captured live specimens, and they definitely have all of Brenner's research. Dr. K could be sitting on years' worth of classified data that explains exactly how the Upside Down works. There's also the question of what happened to the other Hawkins lab kids. We know about 11 and Carly. We know one became Vecna. But what about 2 through 7 and 9 through 18? Did they all die during the experiments? Or did some of them survive? Could the military have custody of other test subjects that we haven't seen yet? Dr. K having Carly suggests she's been systematically tracking down and capturing the surviving numbers. My bet is that Dr. K either worked with Brenner directly or was overseeing his work from the military side. She's too knowledgeable, too prepared, and too focused on 11 specifically for this to be purely academic interest. She knows exactly what 11 is capable of because she's seen the data, reviewed the test results, maybe even observed some of the experiments firsthand. The really disturbing part is what Dr. K might do if she actually succeeds in capturing 11. Is she planning to study her, dissect her, force her to demonstrate her powers while hooked up to monitoring equipment? Use her as a template to create more psychic soldiers? All of the above? The possibilities are deeply unsettling, and none of them end well for 11. But here's the thing. Linda Hamilton's character in Terminator was fighting against an unstoppable force, and she won through determination, strategy, and refusing to give up even when the odds were impossible. If Dr. K has even a fraction of that same relentless drive, she's going to be incredibly difficult to stop. She's not going to give up just because Hopper knocked her unconscious once. She's the type to keep coming back, keep adapting her tactics until she gets what she wants. The government being dodgy and conducting unethical experiments isn't exactly new territory for Stranger Things. That's been a consistent theme since season 1. But Dr. K represents an escalation. She's not just covering up mistakes or trying to contain a threat. She's actively trying to harness that threat and turn it into a weapon. And that makes her incredibly dangerous to everyone, not just 11 and her friends. Now let's talk about the first shadow and how that stage play is apparently crucial to understanding the ending, which is both cool and slightly annoying if you haven't seen it. The first shadow is the official Stranger Things prequel stage play that premiered in London and then moved to Broadway. It tells the story of young Henry Creel before he became Vecna, back when he was just a teenager in the 1950s dealing with the emergence of his powers. The play dives deep into his family history, his relationship with his parents, and most importantly, how he first made contact with the force that would eventually consume him. Full disclosure, I haven't seen the play myself. It's not exactly accessible to everyone, since it requires either travelling to London or New York and dropping a fair bit of money on theatre tickets. But loads of fans have seen it, and the lore it introduces has become pretty essential to understanding what's happening in Season 5. The biggest revelation from the first shadow is the introduction of Dimension X. This is a realm that exists beyond the Upside Down, a sort of primordial source dimension where the dark forces originate. According to the play, Dimension X isn't just another version of Hawkins or Earth. It's something fundamentally alien, a place that exists outside normal reality and possibly outside time itself. In Volume 1 of Season 5, there are several references to the play that longtime fans would recognise. The most obvious one is when Max is wandering through Vecna's memories and ends up at Hawkins High School watching a younger Joyce Byers putting on a school production. The play she's directing is Dark of the Moon, which is the exact same play that features prominently in the first shadow. It's this folktale about a witch boy who falls in love with a human girl, but their love is doomed because he can never fully be human. The parallels to Henry Creel's story are pretty blatant. The Creel house itself, which was a major location at the end of Season 4 and appears again in Season 5, has its entire backstory laid out in the first shadow. The family moved there from Nevada, and it's in that house where Henry starts truly coming to terms with his abilities. The house is significant not just because of what happened there, but because of where it's located. There's something about that specific spot in Hawkins that makes it a focal point for supernatural energy. Ross Duffer gave an interview where he specifically said that Volume 2 will reveal how Dimension X directly ties into the Upside Down, Vecna, and the Mind Flayer. That's a pretty massive statement because it suggests we've been missing a crucial piece of the puzzle this whole time. We've been treating the Upside Down as the source of all the evil and strangeness, but apparently there's something even deeper, even more fundamental behind it all. The theory that's emerged from this is that Dimension X is the true source of evil, and the Upside Down is basically just a reflection or manifestation of it. Like the Upside Down is the interface between Dimension X and our world, the place where these two realities touch and bleed into each other. Vecna didn't create the Upside Down so much as he shaped it using power that came from Dimension X. This also raises questions about the Mind Flayer's true nature. In Season 4, it was revealed that Vecna shaped the Mind Flayer into its current spider-like form, using his own anger and hatred. He essentially gave it form and purpose, but according to the first shadow, there was already something in Dimension X that gave Henry his powers in the first place. So did Henry create the Mind Flayer, or did he just reshape something that was already there? It's a bit like a chicken and egg situation. Another theory suggests that Henry Creel was basically corrupted by whatever entity exists in Dimension X. He was a kid with latent psychic abilities, and when he made contact with Dimension X, something from that realm latched onto him and twisted him into what he eventually became. Young Henry might not have been entirely evil. He might have been influenced, possessed even, by a force he couldn't understand or control. If Dimension X is the real enemy, then defeating Vecna might not actually solve anything. You'd cut off one manifestation of the threat, but the source would still be there, waiting to corrupt someone else, or find another way into our world. The gang would need to find a way to permanently sever the connection between Dimension X and Earth, or maybe even confront whatever rules that dimension directly. The play apparently shows Henry's first encounters with the darkness, his first visions and connections to the other realm. It depicts his family falling apart as his powers grow stronger, his father becoming increasingly paranoid and abusive, and eventually the night where Henry kills his family. But the crucial detail is that Henry isn't operating entirely on his own. He's being guided, influenced by something beyond his comprehension. There's this idea that Dimension X might be sentient in some way, or at least inhabited by entities that have their own agenda. They've been trying to break through into our reality for a very long time, and Henry Creel was just the key they needed. His powers, his anger, his isolation, all of it made him the perfect vessel for their purposes. What's complicated here is that casual fans who haven't seen the first Shadow or read detailed summaries are going to be at a disadvantage when Volume 2 starts explaining things. The Duffers have said they'll make sure the show stands on its own, and you don't need to have seen the play to understand what's happening. But still, there are loads of details and context from the play that add depth to the story in ways the show might not fully recap. Fun fact, the first Shadow was written in collaboration with the Duffers, so it's official canon. Everything that happens in the play is meant to be true within the show's universe. The creative team worked together to ensure the timelines and lore aligned perfectly. So when the play introduces Dimension X, that's not just a theatrical invention. That's a real element of the Stranger Things mythology that the final season is going to explore. There's also speculation that the first Shadow might return to streaming or some other format after the season ends, specifically so people can understand all the references and connections. Having crucial lore locked behind an expensive stage production isn't ideal for a show with a global audience, and Netflix and the Duffers probably know that. The Dark of the Moon, play within a play element, is particularly clever because it's been hinted that the play's ending might parallel how Stranger Things itself concludes. In Dark of the Moon, the Witch Boy's attempt to become human fails, and he's dragged back to the darkness. If that's foreshadowing for Henry Creel's ultimate fate, it suggests he might not be redeemable. He's too far gone, too corrupted by whatever force claimed him all those years ago. If Volume 2 starts diving deep into Dimension X, we might finally get answers to questions that have been hanging over the series from the beginning. Where does the Upside Down actually come from? Why does it exist? What is the Mind Flayer really? Is there a way to permanently close the connection? Or will this always be a threat? So if you're confused about where all this upside down stuff actually came from, apparently the answer is Dimension X, a realm beyond reality where dark forces dwell, just waiting for someone like Henry Creel to give them a doorway into our world. But speaking of the Mind Flayer, let's talk about who's really in charge here. Vecna or the Mind Flayer? Because honestly, this is one of the most contested theories in the fandom right now, and I'm not entirely sure which side I'm on. Season 4 positioned Vecna as the mastermind behind everything. We got this whole backstory about Henry Creel becoming one, getting banished to the Upside Down by 11, and then supposedly shaping the Mind Flayer into the monstrous spider form we've been seeing. According to that version of events, Vecna is the architect of every bad thing that's happened. He created the Mind Flayer as his weapon. He orchestrated Will's kidnapping. He planned the possession in Season 2, and he's been pulling the strings the entire time. But the first Shadow complicates that narrative significantly. The play suggests that something from Dimension X gave Henry his powers in the first place. There was already a dark force out there before Henry ever made contact with it. So if the Mind Flayer or its predecessor existed before Vecna, and if it was the source of his abilities, then how can Vecna be the one in control? It's like a chicken and egg situation, but with cosmic horror entities. One theory is that the Mind Flayer is the true antagonist, the overarching villainous force, and Vecna is basically just its most powerful servant or vessel. The Mind Flayer gave Henry his powers, shaped him into the perfect tool for its purposes, and has been using him to break down the barriers between dimensions. Vecna thinks he's in control, but really he's been manipulated this entire time by something far older and more powerful than he is. This theory gained loads of traction after the first Shadow, because the play explicitly shows that Henry's powers came from outside himself. He wasn't born with them naturally. Something reached out to him, changed him, and that something had its own agenda. If the Mind Flayer was already sentient and active in Dimension X, then Henry's entire transformation into Vecna could have been orchestrated by it. On the other hand, Season 4 was pretty explicit about Vecna shaping the Mind Flayer. We literally see him in a flashback, encountering this sort of primordial darkness in the Upside Down, and moulding it with his hands, using his anger and hatred to give it form and purpose. The Mind Flayer. We know the spider-shaped shadow monster is supposedly Vecna's creation, an expression of his rage-given physical form. But here's where it gets even more complicated. What if both things are true? What if there was a Mind Flayer predecessor in Dimension X that gave Henry his powers, and then when Henry was banished to the Upside Down, he encountered a different manifestation of that same force and reshaped it? So the Mind Flayer we've been seeing is Vecna's version, his interpretation, but it's still fundamentally connected to the original Dimension X entity that corrupted him as a child. That would make the Mind Flayer both the source of Vecna's power and his creation. It's paradoxical, but the Upside Down and Dimension X don't follow normal rules of causality and time. Maybe the Mind Flayer shaped Henry so that Henry would eventually shape the Mind Flayer, a closed time loop of mutual creation. Some fans have theorized that Volume 2 will reveal a hierarchy of evil. At the top is whatever entity rules Dimension X, possibly the original Mind Flayer, or something even worse. Below that is Vecna, who's the most powerful servant and the main interface between Dimension X and our world. And below Vecna are the Demogorgons, Demodogs, and all the other creatures that serve as foot soldiers in this invasion. If that's the case, then defeating Vecna might not actually end the threat. It would be like cutting the head off a hydra. You've removed one major problem, but the source of the threat is still there in Dimension X, and it could just find another vessel, another Henry Creel, to continue its work. The gang would need to find a way to permanently sever the connection to Dimension X itself, not just kill its current champion. There's also this theory that the penultimate episode will make it seem like they've defeated Vecna, everyone will celebrate, and then the cliffhanger will be the Mind Flayer revealing it was in control all along. Like, Vecna's death doesn't stop anything, because he was never the real threat. The Mind Flayer just steps forward, fully manifested, and that becomes the actual final boss for the last episode. That would be pretty devastating, honestly. Imagine the characters thinking they've won, thinking they can finally rest, and then realizing they've only dealt with the secondary threat. The real enemy is still out there, still dangerous, and now they're exhausted and depleted from the fight against Vecna. I mean, think about it this way. The Mind Flayer has been present since Season 2. It possessed Will, it created the tunnels under Hawkins, it built an army of flayed people in Season 3, and it's been this looming presence throughout the entire series. Vecna only showed up explicitly in Season 4, and while he's terrifying, he's still just one individual. The Mind Flayer represents something more vast, more incomprehensible. There's something deeply unsettling about the idea that Vecna, for all his power and cruelty, is still just a pawn. That he's convinced himself he's the architect of a new world, but really he's just doing exactly what the Mind Flayer wanted him to do from the moment it touched his consciousness as a child. He's not a villain who chose evil. He's a victim who became a weapon. That doesn't excuse what he's done, obviously. Vecna has murdered loads of people, tortured them psychologically before killing them, and tried to merge the Upside Down with reality. He's responsible for his actions. But if the Mind Flayer was manipulating him the whole time, pulling his strings the way he pulls the strings of Demogorgons, then the tragedy is that Henry Creel never really had a chance. On the flip side, some fans argue that making Vecna just a puppet diminishes his character. Season 4 spent so much time establishing his motivations, his philosophy, his reasons for wanting to reshape the world. If you reveal that actually he's been controlled this whole time, it undercuts that characterization. It turns him into less of a compelling villain and more of a plot device. My theory is it's both. I think Vecna and the Mind Flayer are two aspects of the same fundamental evil. They're not separate entities with one controlling the other. They're symbiotic, or maybe even two perspectives on the same thing. The mind flayer is the abstract cosmic horror element, the incomprehensible darkness from beyond reality. Vecna is the human face on that darkness, the personality and intelligence that makes it capable of plotting and planning. Together they're unstoppable. But if you can separate them, if you can break the connection between Henry Creel's human consciousness and the mind flayer's vast power, then maybe you can defeat both. Vecna without the mind flayer is just a very powerful psychic. The mind flayer without Vecna is formless, directionless, unable to strategize or manipulate. That might be where Will comes in. He's been connected to the mind flayer since season 2. He knows what it feels like to be possessed by it, to have his consciousness merged with that vast hive mind. If anyone can find a way to sever the connection between Vecna and the mind flayer, it's probably Will. He's been both victim and briefly host. He understands the connection from the inside. Whatever the truth is, we're going to find out in Volume 2. Ross Duffer has said explicitly that Dimension X, the Upside Down, Vecna, and the Mind Flayer's relationship will all be explained. We'll finally understand the full scope of what the gang is up against. Personally, I'm hoping for something more nuanced than just Vecna is the boss or Mind Flayer is the boss. The best answer would be something that recontextualizes everything we've seen while still making sense of the established lore. That's what the Duffers are good at, taking what seems simple and revealing hidden complexity. Now let's talk about 11 specifically, because her journey might end in the most heartbreaking way possible, and I'm not emotionally prepared for it. There's this theory that's been circulating basically since Season 1, and it's gained even more traction after Volume 1. The idea is simple and devastating. 11 opened the first gate to the Upside Down when she made contact with the Demogorgon at Hawkins' lab. She's the one who created the original rift between dimensions, even though it wasn't intentional, and she was basically a child being forced to do it by Brenner. But if she opened it, then narratively, poetically, she might have to be the one who closes it permanently. And closing it might cost her everything. The theory suggests that sealing the gates properly, not just temporarily, but forever, would require 11 to sacrifice herself. Maybe she'd have to stay in the Upside Down permanently to hold the gates closed from the inside. Maybe the act of sealing them would drain all her life force. Maybe she'd have to merge her consciousness with the barrier between worlds, becoming a sort of eternal guardian. However it happens, the end result is the same. 11 doesn't get to live a normal life with Mike and her friends and family. Millie Bobby Brown has been incredibly cryptic when talking about the ending in interviews. She's cried multiple times discussing it. She said it's beautiful and devastating, and that 11's journey comes to a close in a way that feels right. None of that sounds like, and then Elle graduated high school and lived happily ever after. It sounds like something final, something that hurts but makes sense for the story they've been telling. What's tragically beautiful about this theory is how it completes 11's arc. She spent the first years of her life as a prisoner in Hawkins' lab, used as a weapon and experiment by Brenner. Then she escaped and found family and love and freedom. She learned what it meant to be a person, not just a tool, and now, at the end, she might choose to give up that freedom and happiness to save everyone else. But this time, it's her choice. Not Brenner forcing her, not circumstances trapping her. Her decision, made with full knowledge of what it costs. That's what would make it bearable, I think. If 11 chooses sacrifice, knowing what she's giving up but doing it anyway, because she's become someone who protects the people she loves, it's the ultimate expression of the humanity she spent 5 seasons discovering. There's also the theory that 11 and Will both stay in the Upside Down together. 2 people with powers and deep connections to that world, choosing to remain there so their friends and family can be safe. They'd be together, at least. Will, who started this whole thing by being kidnapped, and 11, who accidentally opened the door. Both of them trapped in the place that's defined their entire lives, but this time as guardians instead of victims. Noah Schnapp and Millie Bobby Brown are best friends in real life. They've grown up together making this show. The idea of their characters ending up isolated together in the dark dimension is both beautiful and absolutely gutting. They'd have each other, but they'd lose everything else. Their families, their friends, the chance at normal lives they've been fighting for. I really hope I'm wrong about this. 11 has been through so much. She deserves to be happy, to go to school, to have terrible teenage experiences, like everyone else, to just exist without the weight of the world on her shoulders. Poor Elle has earned a peaceful ending more than almost anyone, but narratively, her sacrifice would be the most impactful. She's the main character, the most powerful person in the story, and the emotional anchor for the entire series. If anyone's death or permanent separation would hit with maximum force, it's hers. And the Duffers have never been afraid to break our hearts if the story demands it. There's another angle to this though. Maybe 11 doesn't die or get trapped. Maybe she just loses her powers. She closes the gates and in doing so burns out whatever part of her brain or consciousness that makes her abilities work. She'd be alive, she'd be free, but she'd be normal. No more telekinesis, no more psychic connections, just a regular girl named Jane Hopper trying to figure out who she is without the powers that have defined her entire existence. That would be bittersweet in a different way. She'd lose the abilities that make her special, but gain the normal life she's always wanted. Is that a sacrifice or a gift? Probably both. The significance of Dr. K saying, "I need the girl," takes on new weight with this theory. Maybe the military knows that 11 is the only one who can close the gates permanently. Maybe that's why Dr. K is so obsessed with capturing her. Not to study her powers or weaponize them, but because they figured out that L is the key to solving the upside-down problem once and for all. Dr. K might be trying to force 11 to do exactly what the theory suggests, close the gates at the cost of her own life or freedom. 11's connection to Vecna, to 1, to the original Hawkins lab experiments, means she's uniquely positioned to end this. They share the same source of power. They were both created by Brenner's experiments, and they're linked in ways that go beyond just being enemies. If anyone can undo what Vecna's done, it's the person who's most like him, but chose a different path. To be honest, if 11 does sacrifice herself, I'm going to be absolutely destroyed. But it would also be kind of perfect in a heartbreaking way. The show has always been about kids facing impossible odds and making brave choices. 11 making the ultimate brave choice, saving everyone by giving up everything, would be the natural conclusion to her story. The alternative, where she somehow survives and gets a happy ending, would be lovely. She'd marry Mike eventually, probably. She'd figure out how to live without powers or how to control them better. She'd have a future. But Stranger Things has never been about easy, happy endings. It's been about the cost of fighting monsters, the sacrifices required to protect the people you love. Whatever happens, 11's ending is going to define the entire series. She's been the heart of this story from the first episode. How her journey concludes will determine whether the show ends with hope or tragedy, or something complicated in between. And that brings us to the end of tonight's theory session. So how does this all actually wrap up? The most likely scenario, honestly, is a bittersweet ending. Not everyone survives, but not everyone dies either. Some characters make sacrifices, some find peace, and the upside down probably doesn't disappear completely. It's more contained maybe, or guarded by those who choose to stay behind. The theory that Will and 11 remain in the upside down as permanent guardians keeps gaining traction, and it would bring everything full circle. Will started this journey by being taken. 11 opened the first gate, both of them ending up there by choice. Protecting everyone else would be tragic but thematically perfect. There's also speculation about a time jump epilogue. showing the surviving characters years later, grown up and moving on with their lives, but never forgetting what they went through together. Maybe a final D&D game that mirrors the campaign from Season 1, bringing closure to where it all began. The Duffers love that kind of symmetry. Whatever happens, it's been one hell of a journey. From a missing kid in a small Indiana town to cosmic battles against interdimensional horrors, Stranger Things has given us characters we love and a story that's kept us theorizing for nearly a decade. Of course, these are all just theories. We won't know what actually happens until Volume 2 drops on Christmas Day and the finale airs on New Year's Eve. I'll definitely be back with a reaction video once we've all had a chance to process whatever emotional devastation the Duffers have planned for us. In the meantime, there are loads of smaller theories we didn't get to tonight. Will Eddie Munson somehow return? Will Scott Clark finally get his moment to shine? Will Steve actually open a Scoops Ahoy? Are any of these likely? Probably not, but that's half the fun of theorizing. But until next time, stay safe. Try not to think too hard about Dimension X and sweet dreams.